Hey guys, hope everyone is doing well tonight. I want to welcome you to the live stream. This is our 34th live stream on the channel. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and watching all the previous live streams. If you missed any of the previous ones, please note that those are all recorded and available on the channel for you to watch anytime. We have several hours of content from each week that's recorded, and then we have over 50 hours of content already streamed live from the past couple of months. So definitely check that stuff out. And tonight we're going to be continuing our discussion of how to create a Pixar-style animated short in Blender 2.8. But before we get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about where we're at with the channel and the business and kind of where we're headed for the future. So a lot's been happening behind the scenes for the Orange Guild. And if you've tuned in before, you know that the Orange Guild is an online learning platform for Blender artists that I've been developing. And lots of things have been moving forward with that, lots of courses in the works that I'm starting to work on. But big news is that we are starting a brand new YouTube channel for theorangeguild.com, and that is going to be starting to develop tutorials and trailers for our products and things like that in the coming weeks. And so as early as next week, I'll be uploading tutorials to the Orange Guild YouTube channel. And so if you just search the Orange Guild on YouTube, you should be able to find our logo and subscribe to that channel. And we're going to do a lot more short format tutorials and specifically Blender geared things for everything that's coming out in the new 2.8 release, as well as getting into all the topics that you guys are wanting to learn about, such as game development, VR graphics, visual effects, character development, 3D illustration, anything you can think of that you guys want to learn is going to be coming your way at that channel. So what I kind of want to talk about is kind of the separation that we're going to start to develop and how that's going to pan out before we jump into tonight's project. So give me just a few minutes to kind of go over what's happening. And then I promise we'll get started and working on some cool stuff tonight. So the Orange Guild is kind of headed its own direction with Blender specific training. And so I wanted to kind of make sure that we had two avenues for the YouTube channels so that people were getting a bit of a variety and that I was able to kind of do my own thing on this channel. And so what you're going to start seeing is if you're specifically here for the Blender training, I'm going to continue to talk about Blender, but it's going to be in a bit more of a laid back, kind of non-technical, non-structured way as I kind of work on my own projects. And for the very structured format of Blender training that you want to see with tutorials, you're going to want to head over to the Orange Guild YouTube channel because that's where we're going to be doing all of our Premiere training for Blender. And so what that means is you'll see a lot of other programs start to appear on this channel alongside of Blender. And so I'm not going to be Blender exclusive. And as you've seen in the past streams, I haven't already been Blender exclusive. But I just wanted to let you guys know, like I use a lot of different kinds of software. And I wanted a place with this channel where I could kind of show off different workflows and then kind of share just what I'm learning as I get in and I work on projects in other software as well. And so if you're into kind of mixing and matching software such as ZBrush and Photoshop and After Effects and Blender and other 3D programs into the mix, then feel free to come and hang out here because that's where we're going to be getting into kind of a mixed bag of things. And it's also going to be kind of like my chance to kind of, take a deep breath, lean back throughout the week and kind of work on stuff that is a little bit off the radar, off the beaten path. And then for the official projects for the Orange Guild, of course, we're going to be doing those on the Orange Guild channel. So stick around here if you want to hang out and chat about anything and everything 3D. It's going to be a bit more of a broad, general platform. And we're going to talk a little bit more about 2D as well as we get into that, because I also do a lot of drawing and painting. So I hope you guys enjoy that. And now let's get into what we're going to work on tonight, which is going to be some of our Pixar animated shorts in Blender 2.8. So let me jump over here and I'm going to switch my screen as soon as I get 2.8 up. And I've got to kind of organize things a little bit here because I'm hopping between 2.8 right now and 2.79b. And so Let me go ahead and pull that up. Okay, now let me switch my screen over. I've got some fans going in the background, so if you guys think that those are kind of distracting and noisy, let me know. They're pretty noisy to me, but I can't really tell if that's coming through on the stream or not. So if it is and it's kind of distracting, just leave me a comment in the chat or below the video. Let me know, and I'd love to get some feedback on that. Okay. As always, I'm going to be listening in the chat, so if you guys have any questions or comments as we get in here and start working on stuff, let me know, and I'll be happy to kind of get in here and talk about what's happening. Okay, so I've been doing some work on the rig, and so this is not the latest version of the rig that I've been working on, but that's okay because we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about how to plan for our short tonight. And so we're going to be hopping in and out of Blender a little bit, and I think for the first half of the stream or so, I'm going to be talking about some more storyboarding and some ideas. So hopefully if you guys are watching, you can give me some comments in the chat about some things you might want to see within the short as far as the story goes. And then the second half of the stream tonight, starting at around 8 o'clock, I'm going to be jumping into Blender, and we're going to be doing a little bit more modeling for our background scenery. So you'll get a little bit of both worlds tonight. Okay, so I'm going to open Photoshop, and let's talk a little bit more about some storyboarding and how we're going to get in here and work on that. So I'm going to start off with a new canvas here. 1920 by 1080 is fine. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of set this up so we can get going on the storyboards. Okay. So I actually just set up a new graphics tablet I got today, so hopefully we will be able to use this effectively in Photoshop. Haven't really tested it yet, but it looks like we're good to go. Okay, so for storyboarding in Photoshop, I kind of like to give myself a page layout with a lot of frames, and then we can go in and kind of talk about how to lay those out. So it's going to be pretty sequential. I'm going to start with kind of a bigger brush here, and then let's go ahead and draw ourselves some storyboards. So I'm going to turn off the shape dynamics, and I'm just going to go ahead and quickly kind of do this so we can get this set up. Okay, once we got one, we can just kind of duplicate this, get a bunch of these into place here. And I'm not measuring this or anything, I'm just kind of like trying to get these sort of evenly spaced, and then I'm just kind of winging the rest of this. So go ahead and mask out this box so that all of those are in the same layer. Let's go ahead and center this. I'll go ahead and quickly make a few more rows here. So we got about 20 frames on this page. Merge all those down into their own layer, and then let's go ahead and lock that. Okay. So I'm going to create a new layer. Let's drop this behind. And now we've kind of got a page set up for some quick storyboarding here. So I'm going to go back to my notes. And now let's just kind of talk about what we want to do for the story as we get in here. So my original thinking was with our little ball that we have here was that we could give it some emotions and things and use the lack of features on the ball for this beach ball to make it a little bit more fun and exciting to give us some creative challenges. And so if you've been following the streams, you'll know that with this current rig, as we move things around, you'll be able to kind of change the width of the stripes here. And I think I need to be in pose mode for that to work. So I'm not sure. There we go. So as we rotate this around, you can see the control for the stripe width is changing, which we've been setting up. Been playing with the squash and stretch kind of effect we can get with the ball here, as well as the ability to kind of rotate. And so we've just been doing some basic rigging to set this up. But the key here is going to be how to utilize the minimalistic aspect of our ball to give us some fun story elements to go off of. And so as we get in here and we start playing with the storyboarding elements, we know that with the ball, we've got the ability to animate the stripes. And within the stripes, we've got the width as well as the colors of the stripes. And we could do the same thing with the ball itself. So the underlying white element of the ball, we could also do the colors for that as well. And so along with this idea of trying to come up with a story for this, we've got other elements to include. We've got background elements for our scenery as well as other potential characters. And so right now we're just talking about a ball, but I've had an idea that we could kind of use here for another character, which is going to be a block. And I think a block works really well in this case because it's got sharper corners and the ball's rounded, so it can be from a design standpoint, a little bit more soft and kind of heroic in the sense that it's going to have a lot of contrast with this character over here. So with the block, we're going to have sort of one of those alphabetic blocks. And then with this animation, we'll be looking at possibly changing the letters. And this isn't typical for nursery sort of alphabet blocks, but we could also do like emojis for the characters on the block itself. We could also do color changes as well. So we'd have the ability to change colors for that. And so there's a lot of things we could do. And the way that we would maybe change the letters on this block would be to do something where the block tumbles. And as it tumbles along, you would have the faces of the block kind of animating those letters as it tumbles by. And so that way you can kind of quickly read what it's saying, and that's how it communicates, which I think would be a fun little comical idea to play with that. And so as far as the main story goes, we need to figure out what we want to be telling. And of course, we want to try to keep this in line with a typical Pixar sort of production. So we can try to get the production quality in place. And the only way that can really happen is if we've got the story in place first, which is kind of the most important part. And then after that comes our ability to bring the graphics up to par with that story as well, so we can match that style. So as far as the story goes, we've got some potential ideas already in place with the beach ball being our main character. Maybe the beach ball is inside on a rainy day. And there's a lot of potential things we could do. Maybe he's sad because he missed out on beach day. And so I'm just kind of brainstorming some ideas that I've had as I've been thinking about some storyboards we get into tonight. Possibly he was left behind on beach day. Could be that, again, we go more like Toy Story-esque in the way that we're planning the story. It could be that the kid has outgrown his toy. And so we could have an entire nursery full of dusty old toys that are kind of not being used anymore. And again, that's a little bit more derivative of the original Toy Story. And so I don't want to just start copying storylines. But I do want to put this in sort of a personified situation with these characters so that even though they're not human, you know, we're going to give the story a little bit more of a human characteristic with this, because that's kind of what we're going to do with this children's story as we mimic the Pixar style. So again, if you guys have if you're watching and have any ideas of what else we could do with the story, don't feel like you can't speak up, because I'm definitely watching in the chat for anybody who wants to kind of be a part of the creation process. And that's really kind of what I've been leaning towards. So there's obviously tons of things we could do with the story here, a lot of things we want to do, but tonight we want to start narrowing down some of those basic, primitive ideas. And then once we have them kind of refined down to a simple, straightforward story, we can kind of start embellishing on top of that and developing an idea for where we want to take that next and build on that. And so once we have a basic premise, we can move on from there to some other things. So if there's anybody in their chat right now that wants to kind of give me a comment on what they're leaning towards as far as the story plot goes, let me know. I kind of like the idea of doing a sad beach ball that is missed out on beach day. We could do a story where the block comes along and tries to cheer him up. And that could be something a little bit more interesting than just having a ball versus a block kind of story, because it's a little bit one-dimensional. But maybe the block has been left behind before. Maybe the block is from an earlier time. So as far as time period goes in the child's life, maybe this was going to be preschool. And maybe the beach ball, as far as the time in the child's life, is kindergarten. And because the block has already gone through the child having kind of left behind his toy and not wanting to really play with it as much anymore, it's been shoved off into the corner. And so as far as our little block goes, it's kind of in a position to understand what the beach ball is going through. And so if anybody doesn't really know what I'm talking about when I say a block and a nursery block, I'm talking about these little wooden ones that you would see when you were a kid. And they're usually kind of plain wood with striped colors on the outside, and then you've got letters, kind of alphabetic blocks there. But, he obviously has been through this. And so maybe he can help the beach ball get through this trying time in his life, where he's been recently. The kid is now in kindergarten, and he's been neglecting the beach ball, right? And so we could go ahead and start with that idea and just kind of build on that. So let's go back to our storyboards here. And let's start with some basic ideas for how to sequence this and lay this out. Now, at first, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through and block out some ideas for frames, and then we can get in here and kind of rearrange things and retime things, because eventually this is going to be a sequential layout for our timeline, and so we'll need to kind of play with that a little bit. But so what we might start to see in the beginning shot is we see a kid, maybe he's outside and he's got a backpack. And he is on his way to school. So give him some little legs here. And I'm just quickly trying to block this in a way that is simple and understandable as a kind of an idea. And then maybe he is standing next to a vehicle of some kind. And he's trying to get into the car or something to go into school. So draw something like that. And then on top of that, we would want to have, this is going to be sort of like a window. And so it's going to be raining outside. And we're going to have some raindrops coming down the window here. And so I'm just going to indicate some of those. Since these are in the foreground, we can make these a little darker. because we're looking from the perspective of, or the point of view of the beach ball here. And so as we get in here and we're kind of looking on a rainy day, you can imagine what we have going on here. And this is the first opening shot of our little feature film here, our little short film. And there we go. Okay, so that's maybe the first shot. And then we cut to a shot that's a little wider, and we might have sort of the window here. There's some blinds and little thing hanging down. And outside we would have the kid again. Next to the car here. And so that's kind of establishing that we're in the same location here. And then out here on, maybe we have a little nightstand or something like that. Little dresser with some knobs and stuff. And the beach ball is going to be kind of sitting on this windowsill right here. And he's going to be looking out and seeing what this kid is kind of going through and remembering, you know, better days or whatever. And so obviously we've got our little raindrops still coming down the window. And got a bit of a frame inside of a frame here. And so we might have a bed here with some pillows. Who knows? And so that's going to establish our main character. And then from there, we're going to want to go into possibly establishing a close-up of our beach ball. And so we might get to a really close-up framing on the ball here. And we want to see it from sort of eye level on the beach ball, which is going to be straight on. And we're going to want to show some color changes. And so this is where we would need to get into some painting probably in our storyboarding to really show this off. But his stripes might kind of change position here. So maybe they get a little skinnier in the middle. Maybe his color changes from, goes from like a bright red to a blue. And that's kind of indicating that he's sad. And then we could have him squash down a little bit. So in terms of this, we could transition to the next frame and then say this is like a continued portion of the last frame here. This ball would then kind of be more oblong like this. That's a little extreme. Let's not make him too sad right away. But we're going to squash him a little bit, and then that's going to show that he's kind of drooping. Like if he had ears, his ears would be like drooping a little bit like that. And so kind of see the same features here. And we'd want to, you know, kind of establish that maybe we're still looking from the other side of the window at this point, back in, and you know, the rest of the room is obviously in the background here. So maybe we have a door, you know, a wall. So do that there. And so you can see that he's kind of getting squashed down. And again, if we're looking through the other side of the window, a good way to kind of show that the storyboard is, again, put those raindrops back in place. So we're seeing that kind of happen. And And this is a little hard to do in black and white without really going into town and rendering this up. So I'm just doing like a first pass now with these boards. And what I would probably do later on is come back in and paint over these, a little bit more attention to the detail. But this kind of gives the basic idea so you guys can tell like what we're gonna do with this. And at this point, after we've established the ball's sad, we might show in the corner, and maybe we want to do a reveal for the block character. And so for this, trying to figure out how we would do this, maybe we could have a like a shoebox of some kind. And in this shoebox would be a bunch of like old toys. So let's put a little lid on there. So we put the label old toys on this one. And then we hear like a rattle inside. So this gives a bit of an excuse for the beach ball to kind of hear what's going on. And maybe we have a lower shot of the dresser here, and we're kind of looking at it from the ground. And maybe the beach ball is kind of up here at the top. And it's surprised to hear what's happening so it's looking over the edge back into the rest of the room. And maybe the shoebox could be kind of underneath this dresser. So I'm just going to draw some drawers here to kind of indicate where we're looking at. And then we've got some legs here for the dresser. And then it would be kind of dark in here, so I might shade that in later or something. But we've got that. Ceiling might be back here. Match that perspective a little bit. And then of course the window would be over here. Okay. So with that in place, we would then need to show the beach ball kind of hopping down. And so maybe we have a, well, we could do a lot of angles for this, but we need to kind of nail down, what we're trying to show here from a story perspective and what we're trying to tell. So maybe we do another shot from the point of view this time of the shoebox. So this would be under the dresser. We would have the lid of our toys. Toys here, and then the framing would be as such that we could have a really wide angle shot of underneath the dresser, where the legs are coming down the sides, and they're like this, and then we could fill all this in really, really shadowed and dark, and the beach ball would be coming down, and it would be bouncing when it hits the ground here. So something like that. And again, to avoid confusion with the rest of the room, I'm going to go ahead and leave this blank in the background, but we would obviously fill that in with scenery and stuff like that. But the beach ball is curious. And so now we would have the ball kind of bounce and land and kind of look around for what's happening. And so maybe we do another angle here, which could show off the space of the room to kind of establish what we're going to be dealing with. And so from the standpoint of a very high bird's eye view of the room, you'd want to have the walls kind of at an angle like this. like that. So we're looking down from maybe like the ceiling fan up top here. And then obviously we would establish where the window is, and the dresser, and then the bed. And, you know, this may not be to scale, but right now we're just kind of figuring out where this is. So the beach ball is now here in the middle. And underneath this dresser here would be the box of toys. Okay. So I don't know what else we have in here. Maybe we have a little table and a chair. And then over here, maybe we have another thing, and it's got a TV or something on it. Here, we might have a bookshelf of some kind. You can see there. And then the doorway would be probably somewhere right around there. But this just gives kind of a nice little different layout and point of view for the rest of this. Okay, so once we have this bird's eye view of the ball dropping down, we can kind of show what's happening. And as the ball maybe moves forward over here to start looking around, we might cut back to the point of view of the box here. And maybe that's when we see the box actually, the lid, maybe the lid flies off. Like that. And then down inside the box, we can kind of start seeing what's in here. And so maybe here's where we start actually seeing the block for the first time. And then we've got, you know, another ball and some other stuff in here, and you know, whatever you want to imagine is in this little thing here. But as soon as the top flies off, you know, we get a hint that something's kind of going on. And so obviously we would still be kind of under the dresser. So you'd have this framing still here, obviously all in shadow back in here. And then you would have the ball out here in the distance somewhere. Okay. This hints that something is going on that's fishy under the dresser, which would lead us down into a shot of maybe from the over the shoulder shot of the beach ball. So maybe this surprises the ball, and we could have it kind of stretched vertically a little bit to hint that it's kind of been surprised and shooken up. Again, might put a little exclamation point there just to indicate on the storyboards what's going on. And then we have off in the distance the dresser. Might make it about that tall. Have the little legs. And the window would be right around here. Put our little knobs on this. And then underneath, we would obviously have the box sitting in here. And the lid. Okay, so the ball has heard something. And I'm just making personal notes right now so that I don't forget, because of these terrible sketches, what I'm trying to show myself for when I go back and clean this up. And so or over the shoulder shot of the ball. He spins around to notice something going on. And again, all of this will kind of give us permission to animate the ball in a way with the stripes changing width and all that kind of stuff to indicate something fun going on there. So once this happens, we would obviously want the ball to kind of closely creep up on the underside of our chest here to determine what's in that box. And we can do a fun little animation of this rolling along slowly and, you know, trying to not be too loud and all of that. So our chest would be here, the little leg and underside. And then the box would be right about here. And we can kind of ghost in where this ball's been. So draw something kind of like this, and then draw something kind of like that, and indicate that it's moving that way. Ball sneaking. Okay. So what this is going to do for us later on tonight as we get in here is it's going to establish what we have to create for the background, for the other props, the other characters, and that's kind of what we need to get at this point is let the story motivate what else we need to create, and then we can start planning on how long it's going to take. You know, is this a good enough idea to keep in the story that we can spend that time for it during the production of this, or is it going to take up so much time that is there a different way we could tell the story that wouldn't sacrifice the quality, but you know would cut down on the amount of time we're spending doing something complicated. So obviously Pixar has super talented artists that can kind of bring any vision to life, and they spend a lot of time and energy and money on developing their own solutions to those problems. But in our case, as we're doing this independently, we want to be thinking through creative solutions for what we know how to do. If we're going to have to learn how to do something as we go, we want to plan for some time for that and not get too bogged down in, you know, doing things that seem impossible from this point of view. Because if you're going to have to take off, you know, several hours to learn a new skill to do something like this, then you got to kind of question whether or not there's a simpler way to go about doing this. Okay, so once the ball is getting ready to kind of sneak up on the box here, we want to have a grand appearance for the block character. And so trying to think of some interesting ways we could do that. We could have the box full of toys kind of explode and kind of get flattened out to the sides, and then all the toys could scatter or roll off the sides like on, you know, they're not alive. Basically, they're just inactive, and they're rolling off and kind of just coming to a rest like inanimate objects. And then we have the single block left in the middle. So let's go ahead and kind of show that close up. I want to do this again from the point of view of the ball. So I'm going to have the ball kind of be right here in this lower right-hand corner of this frame. We're going to see a really close up sort of quarter of the ball here. And then over the shoulder, we're going to have the underside of the dresser. And you'll notice like every time I have a chance to use the background scenery to help me frame something, like I want to use that to my advantage, because otherwise compositionally it can get a little boring to sit here and try to reframe camera positions from every single angle of this room. And so you want to let the story kind of motivate your camera positions, and obviously the scenery can help you do that. Okay, so inside here, I'm gonna draw the box already kind of like flattened out. So we're gonna have it sort of flatten out here. Then it's gonna be flattened out to the side. And I'm introducing a little bit of perspective just to help sell this as, you know, something that has been flattened. And then we don't want to see the block yet, but what we're going to do is have it sort of behind the ball here from this point of view of the camera. And then we'll have all these other toys, you know, like out here, kind of scattering this way. And then there'll be other toys over here scattering the other way. Some will duck behind the dresser out the other side of the leg over here. You know, some of them might come towards the camera and be a little bit bolder this way coming out. But basically we're going to be left with part of the block right here. And again, we're not really going to show the block yet. It's going to be ducked behind. And what we can do here is start to indicate with the storyboard's camera movements. And so we haven't really talked about how to frame that yet. But as you get into creating your final boards for an animated short like this, you'd want to start communicating with, especially if you're going to work with other people, a common vision for how this is going to unfold. And so the best way to do that is to learn how to block the camera angles and the movements using the language they use in the film industry. So all of the actual framing of the compositions of the camera, as we see these in these little storyboarded blocks, have names for how close the camera is to our foreground objects. And so if you guys have never kind of played with this before, this might be something that can help you if you get in here. So as far as some of this language goes, for camera views, and this will vary slightly depending on who you're talking to, but in our case, we'll just use some pretty basic terminology. So the furthest thing you have zoomed out is called a wide shot. And then you've got a medium shot. You've got a close up. And I'm skipping a few here because we're not going to really need all of these. You've got some specific ones like cowboy framing and stuff like that, but we're not going to get into all of those because you're not going to super need them. Then you're going to have extreme close-ups. And for basic, you know, terminology as far as the framing, this is kind of all you need to know to get going. Now there's lots and lots more if you actually get into doing cinema or needing to frame things according to the way they would do it for certain shots. And a lot of this has to do with where you frame on a person. And so since we're not really messing with people right now, I'm not using those terminologies. But if you're talking about a basic person, I'm just going to draw a stick figure. You got this thing called a cowboy shot. So this is pretty much knees up to the head here. And then of course that's going to be the actual width of the frame, but this is a specific range from top to bottom that talks about how to frame on a person. And so that's used obviously to kind of get those old school Western cowboy framings, kind of a bit of a low angle, you know, aiming towards a person, and it shows enough of the hips that you can see them drawing their gun and stuff like that. So it's called a cowboy shot. And there's several more, but anyways, for tonight, as far as just pointing the camera at something and getting it in that square frame, these 4 terms are going to be pretty decent for showing you what that looks like. Then you've got some other things we could talk about, like bird's eye view. So in that shot where we're looking down from the ceiling on our characters, you've got that. And then you've got the same thing from the ground up, which is a worm's eye view. And you'll hear different people call these different things, you know. So don't get too locked in on the terminology, but just so we're all clear on kind of what I'm going to be talking about tonight. These 6 terms are what we're going to be kind of using there. And as far as camera movements, again, there's quite a few things. As we get into more defined movements for specific shots, I may bring more up, but for basic movements, you've got panning, you've got tilting, you've got trucking, you've got zooming. You're not always going to be able to tell the difference just from a storyboard, but this will tell somebody who's animating this from a camera, either digital or in a real camera situation, what style of movement to use. And then you've got dollying, you've got craning. So let's just talk kind of a bit about what these all mean and why they're separated out for specific reasons. So a pan movement is basically you have a tripod and you have a camera on top, and draw this like this. So the camera is going to stay fixed on the tripod and it's going to spin around. So from the top view, if you're looking down on the tripod, the pan is going to be from left to right and spin around the center of the tripod. So you're just turning the camera's point of view. Tilting is going to be the same thing, but it's going to be up and down. So if you have a tripod and a camera, the tilt is going to be kind of up and down like this, so like that. Trucking is going to be actually moving the camera in and out. So if you are picturing the camera, again, it could be on a tripod or whatever, but we have the camera and the actual tripod itself is moving forward or backward, or the camera could be, you know, held obviously, and it's trucking. And I don't believe, don't quote me on this, trucking may be able to be used for left to right movement as well, but that may not be true. So typically trucking is, I believe, moving the camera in and out. Zooming is going to be the same idea, but it's just the lens itself. And so if you have a zoom lens, this would be sort of with the lens all the way out wide. And then if you have a lens that can zoom, you're going to have pieces of it that can kind of zoom out to a longer focal length here. So the camera is staying in the same place, but the lens is zooming in and out. So dollying is going to actually be used with the camera on a track. And so in this case, you can actually kind of truck on a dolly, but specifically, again, dollying is going to be, you're going to have a track on the ground, and then the tripod is going to be set up, or the camera is going to be set up on the track, and it can really only follow the movement of the track like that. And then crane is going to be a special term used for when you have a setup where the pivot is going to be right about here, and right about here is going to be where the camera is at. And then you can obviously crane up and down with this here, and it's usually controlled back here somewhere. So those are all the different kinds of terminology that you would see. And, you know, obviously there's a lot of exceptions. You've got drones now that can do helicopter, bird's eye view type shots. Those would be some sort of tracking along, you know, the terrain and stuff like that. And so rather than trucking, maybe tracking is the other term you'd want to use, maybe interchangeably with dolly for moving side to side. But anyways, just so you guys know, if you're curious about some terminology for storyboarding or for cinema, these are some terms that you're going to be seeing tonight. So hope that wasn't too boring for you guys. So it looks like I actually skipped one of my frames over here. So let me go ahead and quickly fix that. grab this stuff here and just move this over. Okay, let me see where that was. About there. And this one's going to come over here. Okay. Let's go ahead and save this. All right, we've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to spend the next few minutes just talking about some more story elements, and then we'll get into Blender and see where we need to go with our background elements. Okay, so in this shot, obviously the box is kind of exploding out to the sides. I'm just throwing in a few arrows here to indicate some of that movement. And again, we could do some things with the ball to show some surprise. I'm gonna write in box explodes. And at this point, we can do one of those movements I was just talking about. So with the camera movement from here, we would want to show that these are sort of connected in the same frame. So I might draw a connection point there. And we could show, we could actually, if it was wide enough and it was at the right framing, we could actually just continue drawing this image and show from one to the next, it dollying along a track or tracking or panning and stuff like that. And then we would write a little note down here for what that looks like. So in this case, we're gonna say, it's not gonna be a pan, it's gonna be a track. Or maybe I should write dolly, because essentially that's what we're gonna be doing. Dolly left. And in this case, when we dolly left, what we're going to see is a little bit of parallax. So the ball is going to almost go out of frame. And then we're going to see the block actually appear right about here. So the same basic height for the chest or whatever is going to be in place. We're going to see more of the leg get revealed because we're going to be moving to the left. So I want to make sure I get that sort of drawn in place. There we go. And obviously the box is still going to be kind of in place too, but we're going to see more of that as we go left, and maybe a dolly left and pan right. And so the box is going to come out to here. And now that we've got more of this sort of revealed, we're going to see this block being the only thing sort of left in the middle of this right here. So I'm going to draw these lines straight. I'm going to stick with our perspective here. Kind of get this in place. And then if we need to, we can go back in and obviously erase some of these interior lines back out. Okay. So don't know what we would have on the block at this point. It could be an emoji, it could be lots of stuff. But the point is at this point in time, we're choosing to reveal this character. So it needs to have sort of a reveal. Okay. So this is all kind of one big frame shot here. Show a little perspective on that. Okay, so that's our block being revealed, and now we probably want to do a close-up of the block. So going to draw, maybe this would essentially kind of be like a cowboy angle for this block here. Okay. And now that we're closer up, we're going to see more detail. So this is where we would take our time to kind of draw in a bit more of these edges. And each of these sort of insets on the block is going to have some depth. So it just depends on what the perspective is here. But in this case, we're not going to see tons. So I'm not going to kind of spend my time drawing all that. But we would see more of this letter here. So I'm going to draw this little alphabet letter in place. Okay. Something like that. And this is where we have the chance to kind of show off what the block's capabilities are as far as communication goes. So we can decide whether we want to be changing the letters in front of him, whether we want it to kind of spin around and kind of shake itself off. Maybe we show some movement by doing a couple of these lines here to kind of indicate something's happening. And so we don't really need to know that yet, but we're just kind of brainstorming some ideas here. All right, so that's about all I have time for tonight for the storyboarding, but you guys get a basic idea of what we would do. And then for all of these, we would probably go back and label what type of shots these are. And so if we're looking out the window here, we can obviously label what time of day it is. This will correlate with the script that we write. And we could talk about saying this would be maybe a medium shot. And we abbreviate these with just 2 letters, 2 or 3 letters. And so this would be maybe a medium. Maybe this is a close-up. This is a close-up. This would be a close-up. This would be like a wide. Beach ball drops, and it looks like this is from. Okay, so this is maybe a medium shot, and we could put a note here that it's like a worm's eye view. And then this would be a wide shot, and this would be a bird's eye view. This would be a close-up. OTS would be like over the shoulder. So we can make that a note. And then this might be say a wide shot. Medium shots. Close-up. Over the shoulder, or maybe a medium shot. Not really sure there. This would definitely be close up the shoulder. And then this is maybe an extreme close up. Would be a good example of that. Not really sure if an extreme close up right there is necessary, but you get the idea. Okay, so that's basically it for tonight for the storyboarding, and hopefully you guys got a good overview of how this works. If you've never done it before, you can obviously be as loose or as organized as you want with this. And after I get more of my final boards in place and my story fleshed out, I'll kind of share with you guys what that looks like. Okay, so based on this, we need to kind of decide what to do in Blender tonight with the storyboards as we have them now. We know that most of the time, from this point forward, what we're going to need are elements we've already defined. So even if the script changes and we kind of make the story go in a different direction or whatever, as long as we know the overall environment is kind of locked, then it would be a little bit safe to move forward with some of the background elements. And so this is where you'd want to start delegating tasks to a team if you have partners or people that work for you. If you're working on something together, you can basically take your modelers, your texture artists, and basically give them something to get started on. And so if you know you're going to have to create an entire bedroom for a child, in this case, you could say, all right, look, we don't really know where this is all going to go with the characters, but we do know we're going to need an entire bedroom full of furniture and all this type of stuff. So you guys can start working on that, and we're going to keep working on the story and the characters and all of that. So let's make a list of the stuff that we're going to need to start modeling, and let's talk about what that kind of looks like. All right, I'm going to group these so I can just kind of turn them on and off. It's going to be a new layer for notes up here. So overall, we know we're going to have a bedroom. In that bedroom, we need to decide from these boards first which objects are kind of the most important, and then we can kind of delegate from there. So we know we're going to need a window. We're going to need a chest with drawers. And then we know we're going to need a bed. We're going to need the shoebox of old toys. And then within that, we could say old toys. We could say cube character, or not cube. It would be it would be a block character. It's amazing how much worse my handwriting looks using this tablet as compared to on paper. All right. What else do we need? We're gonna need, inside the room, we're gonna need walls, a door, ceiling, carpet, fan for the ceiling. Lots of other stuff probably we can think of, but this is plenty to get working on stuff tonight. So we just needed to kind of decide what we want to start working on. I think blocking in the overall size of the room first would be a good place to start. So let's talk about getting into Blender and kind of establishing that workflow. So for anybody who hasn't been watching the past live streams, the character here has been kind of modeled and created for Cycles. And so rather than using Eevee for this, I think Cycles is a bit more in line with what Pixar's rendering engine would be capable of. And so I'm going to choose to kind of stick with Cycles for this as we get going. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start playing with some other things here. So I know that we've got this here, but rather than create a new collection, I'm just going to start a new scene, and then we can kind of use that as its own file and play around as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Let's use the cube to kind of help define the overall dimensions of the room at least. And so I'm going to move this up here. I'm not exactly sure if I want to stick with the old school dimensions for our scene here, because I'm in the US, so I probably want to switch this to Imperial, because I kind of know the measurements for a basic room a little bit better in Imperial measurements. So basic room height is going to be, let's say, 10 feet. And then you'd want the dimensions of the room here to be, first let's apply the scale here. And location. Okay. Let's do maybe a 12 by 12. we'll say this is, okay. Just realized I've been kind of editing in edit mode and object mode, which is not going to help. So stick with one or the other here. 10 feet, 12 by 12. Okay. Let's jump in and position our cursor to the selected. And then I'm going to move the origin to our 3D cursor. Reposition this so that it is in the center of our world here. Cursor, there we go. Okay, so this is the basic dimensions for our room, and now we can kind of decide how we want to handle this. So if you're familiar at all with like regular film sets in Hollywood, the way that they would go about kind of creating this is so that it's modular, and that way you can kind of put your camera in any location without having to run into a wall. And so we can kind of adopt the same idea here, just in case we need to separate things out. And so what we'll do is jump into edit mode. I'm going to separate the ceiling so that it's kind of its own thing. And then each of these walls will kind of need to be its own thing here. And so I'm going to go ahead and just separate these out. And then obviously the floor is by itself. And so now what we can do is kind of start to label these as we go. And rather than spend a lot of time doing that, I'm actually just going to go ahead and make sure that these are all under the collection. So I'm going to call this collection bedroom. So now let's start working on some basic things here for our bedroom. So from the front view here, this is the room or the wall that we're going to put our door in. And so let's go ahead and jump into edit mode and let's create a loop cut in this wall here. And we can kind of position this on the global transform with the height that we have in mind. So typically I think we're going to be looking at like what is maybe an 8-foot door. I'm not totally sure on that. And then for the hole, basically we just need to determine how wide this is. So if this is -3 for our edge here, yeah, so -3, this would be -6, and actually that is already good. So 3 feet wide is about the width that we want to be at. Yeah, so I think it is 6 feet, not 8. That sounds better, or that looks better. Let's grab our vertices, move these back down to 6. Okay, and then with our face mode here, let's delete this face here. And there we go. We got a hole for our door. Okay, so I'm going to start kind of differentiating sections of the room, so that way we can group them into different collections. So anything that's on the floor, I'm going to go ahead and hit M, move this to a new collection, call this floor. And that way anything inside of that collection will actually be moved to the floor here. So this here, let's move that to the floor. All of these can be under the walls. So I guess unhiding right now does not leave everything selected, which is kind of a bummer. Let's move these to the walls. Okay. And then I'm going to select the walls collection, hit M, and move that into the bedroom collection. So we've got the ability to kind of nest these collections instead of using the layers as we did previously, which is kind of cool. So now all of these will need to move to walls. There we go. And then we can label the ceiling as its own as well. So let's move this to a new collection, call this ceiling. And what I'd eventually like to do is have all of the objects connected to these surfaces kind of parented inside of these collections. That way we're not going to be having to hide and unhide tons of stuff separately. So I'm going to move the ceiling collection in the bedroom so that is in the right place. Make sure we have that under ceiling, and there we go. So now, if we were to hide all of this stuff, we've got things on separate layers here. And I want all of these to be under bedroom. So if they're not currently, I want to select this, hit M, and move that to bedroom. It looks like it's not doing that correctly. So I'm going to drag these in instead. And now they're all nested. So everything on layer 1 is part of the bedroom. And then inside of this, we've got 2, 3, 4, and I'm using the numpad above my keyboard, not on the side, to turn this on and off. So 1 will enable everything, 2 is just the floor, 3 are the walls, 4 is the ceiling. So now with the walls, we want to do the same thing for each side. So this would be under bedroom, we would want another collection. We want this to be front. And then this one would be back. This would be right. Drag that back in the walls, and then we got left. Okay, staying very organized. Awesome. All right, so let's save this as set. Okay, so now we've got the ability to turn everything on. Just the floor, just the walls, just the ceiling. And we've got front, back, right, and left. So that's up to 7 on the collections for my keyboard. All right. And so now we should just be able to put anything in each of these sections inside these collections without worrying about stuff. So we'd want to kind of build this out a little bit at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on the window. So let's create another couple of loop cuts here. And make sure I've got these in the right place. I think I'm going to move this one. Let's move this one to 3. Not sure the exact width of the window, but that kind of feels right. So I'm going to go with that. Place another loop cut. And then this would need to be, let's say, maybe 3 feet off the ground. Up to about there. In the middle of the window would be kind of somewhere in there. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and erase out the hole. So let's delete this face for the window. And there we go. Okay. So turn those on as we need to. And we got our room kind of in place. So we need to decide, do we want any more windows? Do we want anything else in the room? And I think maybe we would possibly want a closet. So let's go ahead on this wall and decide to kind of cut this in place. So I'm gonna add a division there. Let's move this up to about 8 feet. Let's add another division there. And let's move this one to about there. And still getting used to the 2.8 keyboard shortcuts. I think that's probably good in terms of that placement. And then we can kind of start blocking in things. If you feel more comfortable kind of going low res and blocking in all of the positions of your models first before you start kind of making the finished versions, it's fine. I'm not sure that's super necessary in this case. So I may just go ahead and start playing with some models here. But what I would like to do first is kind of get the rest of the room in a good place blocked in before we get too far into this. And so I think I may go ahead and start building out certain sections of the frames and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's deselect everything. Let's turn off our ceiling here. And I'm just gonna keep the front on by itself. Okay, so from this point of view, we're gonna need a door frame. We're gonna need light switch. We're gonna need trimming around the bottom. And I think in our case, that's probably enough for our little scene here. We don't need to get super complicated because the stylized look we're going for is not gonna be super realistic. So we just need to get basics in place. So I'm gonna grab a plane here. Let's reposition this. It's a little hard without the wireframe to see from a orthographic view of where this is lining up, so I'm not sure I'm super happy about that feature. Anyways, wish there was a way to switch that on and off, but maybe something they can work on for 2.8. Okay, so let's kind of get our trim in place. And at this point forward, since we've already blocked out the overall dimensions of our holes and windows and doors and all that stuff, I'm just going to eyeball the rest of our trim and frames and all that kind of stuff. Because I think it's not going to be super critical that we get this perfect as long as it kind of looks the way it's supposed to. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I feel good about what's kind of happening. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of get these in place where they need to be. Let's throw a solidify on this. Which may not actually be working in 2.8 right now. So it looks like it is in object mode, but not in edit mode. So I'm not sure why that's not working, but oh well. One thing I didn't account for is the width of the walls, so we'll have to play with that a little bit as well. But for now, let's get in here and do the same modifier. Let's do a solidify. I'm gonna go negative. I think maybe 1 foot. So that measurement is definitely off. So let's apply the scale, and maybe that's why. So maybe half a foot there for the wall thickness. Seems about right. And for this, we'll go ahead and apply the rotation and scale so that doesn't happen to us. Say it's about 1 inch thick. And now we can just go ahead and kind of angle things in as we need to. So I'm not totally sure how I'm going to block this in. Maybe in this case, since we're so far off in the distance, we're not really going to get super close up. We could just use normal mapping to get those details into place. I'll go ahead and assume maybe that's what we'll end up doing. But for now, let's go ahead and just kind of extrude things into place, and then we'll figure this out as we go. Right. So this kind of need to be at about a 45-degree angle. If your distances look off, again, you can just kind of eyeball that. Get those into place. Scale those so they're all about the same height, and there we go. Okay, so solidify, our trim is going to be kind of already in place for us, and we can look up a reference for how this needs to actually look according to house specs and dimensions and all that kind of stuff. But I need to get in here and do that. Obviously, if we want to, let's go ahead and apply the solidify. We get in here and bevel this a little bit. Select all of those outside edges. Do that. Another way to do that would be to leave the solidify in place and then just add a bevel. And then if you want that to only work on specific segments, you could go into edge mode and then just sharpen up specific edges that you want beveled. So in this case, if we want all of these to be creased, we crease those all at one. Deselect the things that are selected, and then just go back around and say, all right, these outer edges all need to be creased down to like a 0.1, and that will lock all of your other areas into place, and those are the only edges that will kind of get beveled. And then of course that's dynamic, so you can kind of change that. So 0.5 would be a little bit less, and so on and so forth. Also play with the bevel weights. And I think maybe we need to change the width. So let's get a weight here, and that will change kind of like its bevels. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's take our crease down to 0. And then let's just grab these outer edges again. I'm going to apply the solidifier. See if we can get this going. Okay, there we go. So let's go back and undo our application there. Let's change our bevel weight here to 0.5. Okay, so it is beveling. It's just very, very light. Can't see it. Okay, so the bevel's not doing it for you. You can always use a subsurf. And once again, you'd want to use the crease. So throw the crease all the way up to 1 here. Just select these outer edges. This will also kind of do it for you. Take the crease down 0.25, and that's another way to it. Of course, you're going to need holding geometry to kind of make this work a little bit better for you. So you might want to move that up a little higher there. But that's another way you can do it. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything for now. And we'll go back and add that as we need to later on. Okay, so we can do a little bit more modeling on the light switch. Could take this inner edge here, pull it out a little bit from the wall so that it's got a bit of a angle there for the trim. Not much, but just a little bit. We'll make it a little bit more three-dimensional. And then we can go ahead and add a light switch. So what I'll probably do is go back and spend a little bit more time getting reference and kind of doing this in a little bit better way. But for now, kind of get this into place. If you want to snap this to a like the wall, actually turn on facial snapping and then say align rotation to the surface of an object. And then holding control, you can actually just snap this onto a surface here. So I'm going to back this off the wall just a little bit so that it's in front of it. I'm going to rotate this on the y-axis by 90 degrees. And then we're going to scale this down until it's about the right size. Something like that. I'm sure there's specifications for how high these need to be in the room and, you know, how far apart they can be on the wall and all that sort of stuff. But in this case, we'll just kind of block it in and come back and fix that as we go. So let's add a solidify. Kind of move that back. Grab the front of the face here. I'm going to kind of scale this in a little bit. And before I bevel this, go ahead and cut our hole into this little switch here for where this needs to go. Grab our face here, and let's extrude this and delete that face. Okay, so now I'm going to grab all of the edges that I want to bevel, and I'm just going to go ahead and bevel these kind of manually because it'll be pretty fast to do it this way. Okay, so all the main edges are selected. Hit Control B to pull that off, and then I'll kind of add a couple of segments there, scrolling up on the mouse wheel, and then bevel that slightly. So that's all we need to get our little high-res light switch into place there. And then we can go ahead and model in our light switch. Okay, I'm going to delete that plane, and then let's select these vertices, Shift S, cursor is selected, and then when we add a plane, it will go right into the middle of our selection there. Scale this down. So let's flip our normals. That is Shift in now in 2.8. Select all of our vertices here and then bevel again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is grab these and pull this back just a little bit. Pull that back slightly towards the wall. And then we're going to want to position this back here. I'm going to move my 3D cursor to right around there. Make sure we're pivoting around the 3D cursor. Then when I rotate, that'll put that back there. And we're going to want to move this a little further back so that it rocks, kind of like a real light switch would. We'll get that in the lowest position there. And kind of set that up like that. Let's go ahead and smooth our objects so they're shaded smoothly. Probably a little fat there, a little fatter than it should be, but that's kind of correct. Select this and move that down. If we want, we can grab all of these and from the individual origin, scale those in on the x-axis. I'm going to do the same thing up on the top and bottom rows just to keep those kind of in place. And there we go. All right, for the most part, that feels pretty good. We're going to need a few more things to make this feel like it is perfect, but I think we're getting there. And then, of course, we'd want to add little screws for placing those in the wall and all that kind of stuff. But for now, I think that's a decent start for the wall. And if you want to place little screws, then go ahead and grab some of our extra objects here. I'm not sure if these are actually loaded in the Blender or not yet. Let's save before I do that. Go to add-ons. I'm sure these haven't been ported over yet, but type in extra objects under add mesh. You can turn that on, but it's probably not going to work. So add mesh. Yeah, they're not there. So we'll need to wait for this to be updated in order to place this in. Or we could take it into Substance and kind of do this with normal mapping. That would also work, which might be a better solution in this case. Okay, so essentially we need to kind of copy this setup over to the other walls, starting with the trim. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the trim here. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to move this over to the walls, and so the front we're going to do the let's do the left wall. And now let's just solo the left wall here so we can see that. I'm going to rotate this by -90, and then I want to get rid of this middle section with the door. So I'm going to go ahead and chop out those vertices, and then we can actually go ahead and get rid of these middle vertices as well for this wall. And then I just want to bridge these. So I'm going to search for the bridge edge loops command. And now we can move this into place. And you can see from when I'm switching into the top view, it's impossible to see this wall because there's no thickness. So again, not sure why that has been left that way. But something that I hope that they kind of work on and fix. Okay, so one of the other things that we haven't done yet is flip these around the outside. We can either rotate these in edit mode so that they're facing the other direction, or we can just flip the normals. So in this case, we could just do this. Let's see, it's a brighter color, which indicates that it's the face normal is facing us, which is what we want in this case. Line that up, and then let's go ahead and solo the front again. And then once again, we want to flip those normals on the other side. So in this case, I'm going to flip the normals the other way, like that. And then we're going to want to go in +6 inches instead of negative for the solidify modifier. We do the same thing for all of these walls if we want. We don't really need to do it for the left and the right, but for the back wall, if we want to add the solidify modifier, we want to go 6 inches. Apply the scale so that is actually 6 inches, and then we want to flip all of these the other way, just like that. Okay, so now with all of these selected here, this one will actually need the same thing. So again, we're gonna flip the normals, and those are all flipped now correctly. So we just need to add a solidify modifier. Apply the scale. And why not? Let's go ahead and add a solidify on this one as well. And there we go. All of the walls are now as thick as they should be. So let's go ahead and finish out our trim here. Hit Shift-D, and then I'm going to reposition our cursor to the center. And let's rotate around the 3D cursor. And I'm going to choose rotate 90 to get that into place. And then I'm going to hit Shift-R to copy our trim into the same place. So did not do the Shift-D, so now we got there we go. Okay, so now we just need to place a couple of loop cuts in the proper locations here for our trim. Get that kind of close, zoom in and slide this to where the trim needs to stop. Select all of these middle faces here and just delete those. Okay, now I want to go ahead and bridge our faces here. So I'm going to select these edges, just hit F with our F2 modifier turned on to close those holes. And there we go. We've got our basic trim in place for the room. And we can work on maybe the closet doors or the windowsill. The trim for the windowsill is going to be basically the same. So one of the only things we're going to have to keep in mind here is if we're going to do like a windowsill for the bottom parts, it needs to not hang over in such a way that it would block the chest from sitting in front of it, if that's going to be where we leave it for our storyboards. So that needs to kind of be taken into consideration. And we could also kind of start working on other parts of the room as well. We could do the chest or the bed or a lot of things. So what's really cool is now that we've got some basic things in place, if we go back in and start turning on certain sections of our room here, and again on the floor, we're going to want to flip these normals. In fact, every surface of the original cube needs to be flipped because they were all facing on the outside. And so we need to make sure we go ahead and do this for the ceiling as well. So let's turn this on. Flip that as well. So we're only going to be looking at this from the inside. So we'll leave this off. But now that we've got this in place, we can kind of start working on some basic lighting and getting that set up for our room. So let's go ahead and add in some lights. And what we might do in this case, since we're gonna have a window, is we could possibly use some portal lighting. I'm not sure if this is actually in place yet in 2.8. So we can play with it and see if it works, and if it not, we can always just kind of fake what we need. So let's get our sun in position. And in our case, maybe we'll grab this and kind of move it around there. Yeah, something like that. It's going to be kind of an overcast day, obviously, because it's raining for part of the scene. So we're going to need to keep that in mind. But portal lighting would be done with a, I think it's done with an area light. I haven't actually done this in a while, so we'll move this over to where the window is, and let's just see if it's available currently. Thinks we're still using Eevee, so we need to switch over to cycles to enable this. Yeah, there we go. Portal lighting is available. So what I really like about some of the new settings with 2.8 is the ability to interactively manipulate things in the viewport. So it's using a square right now. If we change this to a rectangle, we can actually just drag the size of our light into place, which is really kind of cool. And with the portal, you're going to want to fill up the window so it's the size that it needs to be, and then kind of bring that straight in. And this will help Blender kind of indicate to the engine when it's rendering what light rays need to go into the room. This works really well for rooms that are enclosed for interior shots. And so in this case, let's go ahead and create a camera. And We'll put this in the room. And I'll also just drop in a dummy object like Suzanne. And that will help us see how the lighting is looking. Okay, so let's go from the point of view of our camera here. Okay, so let's change the camera to a bit of a wider focal length, maybe a 24mm. Make sure we're kind of in the corner of the room here. And I'll bring it down to the floor and we'll aim it up like this. Turn the ceiling back on, and might need to put some other objects in the place of the holes around the interior of the room so that it's bouncing the light around properly. But we can start with this and just kind of see what we get. So I'm going to box in our render engine here. Control B, box that in, and then save, and let's hit Shift Z and see what we're looking at. Okay. So looking decent to start off with. I think we're already set to using Filmic. Let's go to color management, Filmic. Let's go to base contrast for this, and it may not show up in here yet. So let's check this. Yeah, it does. Okay. So let's go back to base contrast, and I'm going to use this to kind of judge how we're doing with our lighting setup. Let's go to sampling. Let's turn up our viewport tracing to 128. Go back to our sunlight, use the nodes, and then let's turn the strength up to about 18. Maybe a little too much there. Okay, let's block in the rest of these holes so that they're not kind of leaking out any light. And for these walls, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that those are extending beyond the outer perimeter. That way we're not, again, leaving any sort of chance that there's light kind of leaking out here. So for the front and back sections, let's just grab all these outer vertices, scale those out a little bit so that that's completely blocking that off. Then I'm going to grab some simple plane objects. And let's kind of move these over and get these into place. Okay, for the floor, I'm gonna do the same thing. Let's just extend it out to the sides. And there we go. So now we're completely closed in inside our room. So everything should kind of be bouncing around inside the walls for our lighting. Let's grab our monkey head here. Add a new material. It's gonna use the principled BSDF. So I'm going to turn down the roughness. It's kind of more reflective here. And then for the rest of these objects, let's just use the same material. Turn off the rendering engine real fast. Just to make this a little easier to see in the viewport, let's jump over to the preview, or the viewport display. The diffuse color, I'm going to switch this to a red so we can tell what's been textured and what hasn't. Control L, materials. Okay. So now we jump inside. Grab these. And those. Okay, should be everything. Okay, and rather than use the principal BSDF, we could use some custom shaders that we set up, which I may end up doing. But for now, let's just leave everything unprincipled because that's typically what Pixar would do with their Disney shaders anyways. And then later on, if we just start customizing, we can for our stuff here. So I'm going to jump back to our portal here, make sure we don't have any other custom things we need to set up for this, which doesn't look like we do. Let's be a little bit bluer. Let's turn that up as well. Let's also jump into our denoising, turn that on for when we actually start rendering. And at this point, we play a little bit with the lights. Light paths. And it's looking like it's cleaning up pretty well if we give it some time. Let's take our caustics and let's turn those off. So it might speed things up quite a bit. Let's turn our bounces up to 32. And for diffuse, glossy, let's turn those up. Let's give this a render and see how this looks. So the denoising is going to help a lot. In this case, since we're relying on it to clean up so much, we're probably going to need to just turn up our samples when we do a final render. But that is one of the things about doing interiors that is kind of tough, is that it takes a little bit more to bounce that light around the inner portions of your room to make it look like realistic lighting. Okay, I'm getting kind of a little bit more of a weird blue cast than I would like, so let's go back to the sun here. And let's take that a bit more in the purplish direction. Let's preview what that looks like. Most of what I do with the light, I want to do subtly when we start rendering. I want to color correct in post to get the added effect of a bluish tint to the scene or something like that. If we lock it in the lighting at this point and it's too harsh, it's going to be a lot more difficult to remove color that we don't want out of the scene without affecting other things around the shot. So it's really important that we kind of lock that in into a place that we're happy with. So subtlety is the key with the saturation. We want it to be a gloomy kind of rainy day, but we don't want it to be, you know, freakishly blue or anything like that. And then if we want to push it, obviously we can color correct later. But one example of doing that in Blender, if you want to kind of push that, is to use the color management down here, check off use curves, and then if you look under like a lower contrast, you're going to get the flattest image possible. And then you can come back in and add in your own contrast. Contrast curve like this, really punch darks in there. And then if you wanted to affect individual channels, you could switch this over to specifically looking at your RGB channels. So black levels you can change here for kind of switching this into place. And it's a little slow right now because I'm rendering, but a lot of options in here to play with. So you can see what a difference that makes right there. And then the same thing would have to be true if we rendered. So if I turn this off and we start rendering, turn this down so we're a little bit lower resolution here. So if I render this now and we go back to color management, you can see that when we turn this on, this will be affected as well. So use those curves, and then that will also affect your final render. So kind of an easy way to color correct in here. And of course, we also have the compositor that we can use to change that inside of Blender as well. So this is a good start for the lighting. Obviously, if you're wanting to keep all the lights off on an interior for a rainy day, even though that's technically accurate in terms of the way it might be in your home or something like that, for a scene like this, you're going to want to add supplemental lighting that is motivated either by practicals, where we actually have lamps and things that are turned on inside the room, or if you want to keep all the lights off, you have to just make the lighting subtle enough that it feels like it's coming from the window and can be motivated by bounced light and stuff like that. And so the trick there is, again, just not punching up the lighting so high that it makes it feel unnatural. But you'd want to light it like somebody that's working on a film would light their set. So yeah, we're getting a lot of ugly artifacting because of the denoiser algorithm. So obviously the best way to fix that is to go in, and two things you can do to fix that. One is to turn up your samples. And so here under the final render, we want to turn this up to maybe 512. And then under your noise, your denoising here, you'd want to change some of these around. So you could take down the strength, change the radius a little bit, up or down, just depends on what you're kind of working on here. But by turning the samples up, you're going to get cleaner images anyways out of the box. And then again, by changing your denoising settings, you can play with what's too much or too little and dial that in for each shot. And obviously, the more light you add into the scene, it's just like a real camera sensor. The cleaner your image is going to come out, because Cycles likes being able to have things that are illuminated, so it has more information to render with. The less information you give it, the more it has to fill in its gaps. And if you're not giving it enough to go on, then it's obviously just going to make up data to fill in all that stuff. And that's where the noise comes into play, because it's not accurately producing the image that you want. So this is working quite a bit better, as you can see from the denoising right about here. We're not getting as many splotches and stuff like that. So we'll just have to see how that works on the rest of the image as it cleans up. You can see by adding more samples, we're slowing things down quite a bit. And so this is where you need to kind of start using tricks to optimize your scenes. And, obviously if we can play with doing some interior lighting and some of these angles without having to use the portal thing, it might end up being a better, more faster way to render the scene that's still going to work out as realistic. It just depends on, what your goals are and how much render time you have to play with as you're getting here to play on your final shots. But for a scene that's as simple as this, we're getting into some pretty heavy render times for this is half res, so not even